Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Mel,
Anita,
how are you? Do you ever watch Arrested Development?
I have seen it, yeah.
There's one character and he always goes, "How are you? How are you?" So I just said that to you, even though it's against the rules to say that to you. How are you?
I'm fine. Breathing.
Oh.
For me, when I was in early grief, it was so hard for me when people asked how I was, because I was like, do you want the real answer, or do you want the answer that will just like get you out of my way?
Yes.
And now I'm like just so numb that I'm fine. So I don't care when people ask me. You can ask me how I am.
Okay. My kids are psychotic today, so hopefully that's okay. And they don't come in here and nobody severs a toe or something. You have something exciting happening this week. Do you know what it is?
What?
You're going to get a new dog. Did you
Guys,
forget?
No.
Just kidding.
I just wanted to see if you remembered, or if it was something
I
else
do.
I wasn't aware of. Yes. I earned another dog since I had another life explosion, aka quarantine, moving across the country. So now I'm driving across the other part of the country to Washington to go get another dog. But this one is a small one. It's not going to be as big as my current dog, so it's going to be manageable. Everyone can judge me. I am a crazy dog lady and I don't care.
Mel thinks that she's going to name the dog Jersey because her last name is Shore.
And it's funny.
But I have respectfully submitted Jasondra to the naming options because she named one of her dogs after her dead husband, and I thought she should name one of her other dogs after my dead husband. We'll see what gets put on the birth certificate. Do dogs have birth certificates?
So Jersey is honorarily Jasondra.
Which we're not sure that's a word, but we're going with it.
Mm-hmm.
Jasondra.
Jersey Marie Shore is her name. I will post pictures, perhaps. And everyone is free to judge my lifestyle choices. I don't care. My whole family died when Scott died. My whole house died, except for me. I was the lone survivor. And so this is how I'm coping. And I'm in, 2.5 years? So
What kind of dog is it? You told me, but
it's called a
tell
bug.
everybody else.
It's a half pug and half Boston Terrier.
It's going to be cute.
Anita, Father's Day just happened.
Yep,
So
it did.
That's kind of a triggering holiday always for widows and widowers.
Yes.
How did it go?
I tried really hard to pretend it wasn't happening, and that turned out to be the wrong approach because it also happened to be my son's birthday. So I was like, we'll just focus on the birthday and not pay attention to Father's Day. And at some point in time, I kind of think about it like a serial killer was like walking 2 steps behind me all day. And then finally it was like, you can't ignore me, and came and like stabbed me in the brain. So it was hard. I didn't like it. Yeah. So I was trying to be like, happy birthday. And then I was like, I'm really sad. Like, this is sad. This is supposed to be your day. But we went to the cemetery and I put a decoration on there that's like a name plaque, like the old school name plaques that you would see on a desk in like a 1970s movie.
Yeah.
And it said, go ask your mother. That's what we put on his grave for the day. And then I had to go get it so they wouldn't throw it away. But
it's
that's
kind
all
of,
it said.
I mean, I know you've been having like trouble figuring out the whole headstone situation, but I do love that it can be changeable all the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
I know. And people will just be like, what is going on here? Anyway.
Like, why is that lady crying over a piece of grass? Like, there's obviously not a body there because the grass is all healed over.
Yeah, you can still kind of see his spot because the grass is a little greener on his spot, but it's definitely fainter. You can't see it as well. So,
So, some news. We started our Widow Win portion on Facebook, and we had a few people respond. So that was fun. Thank you, those who responded. For those who have not, please respond. We want to see what you're up to.
And hopefully you have a win that you can respond with. Mel, I have something exciting too this week.
What's happening?
You're getting a dog, and I'm getting a bike.
What?
Yes. I bought a new road bike, and I'm waiting for it to be delivered. I'm so excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
I know. And then we can go rollerblading.
Yeah.
We can put J. Sandra Jersey Shore in a stroller because I have one.
Put her in a basket. I actually did. I had a pug before, and pugs don't breathe very well. And we put her in a stroller.
Don't?
No, we would put her in a stroller and take her places.
They don't breathe very well?
Yeah, they're smashed faces. They're like brachycephalic breeds where they're smashed face. You should know this because you're a medical professional. And you tell me.
I'm just wondering why you design a dog that can't breathe. I feel like natural selection would have said that's a bad idea.
But here's the deal. It's artificial selection.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of mean, like that they're selectively breeding to make it so the dog can't breathe. It's kind of rude.
I love pugs, so whatever. I'm getting a bug.
Whatever.
Hopefully, this dog will be able to breathe a little bit better than a pug since it has more Boston in it. And although Bostons do have short snouts, they're not as bad as pugs.
They're not like they ran right into like the wall going 1,000 miles an hour.
So
Smash.
rude. You're so rude. I know. But it's true.
That's kind of what they look like. Yeah. Okay.
And Anita, we had a widow wife date this week. That is good for us.
Did. Oh my gosh. I got rid of my kids. They went camping with my sister. It was amazing. And so we went and we bought succulents, and Mel ate gross Carl's Jr.
It's so good.
She likes it. I don't.
Yeah.
The line for In-N-Out was like 4 miles long, so we couldn't go there.
Mm-hmm.
It was way fun.
It was good to get out of the house. Like, for me, it's really easy just to cave all the time because I always have stuff to work on and I can keep myself busy. And so it was great to spend some time with you. Quality time.
Quality time. I know. I didn't even have to like rush back for anything. Okay.
Guys, we have exactly 0 people contributing to our international contest. So I'm kind of bummed out about that.
I'm not.
Nobody wants to hear Anita play the clarinet. Yeah, but guess what? If they don't hear you play the clarinet, they won't hear me play the piano. And I know how to.
That's true. You guys do want to hear Mel play the piano. She's like kind of good at it.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know how to anymore since I've been jobless.
I think you probably still do.
I don't know. Well,
yeah.
Fine. Fine. Be that way. If you don't want to contribute, fine.
Fine. We'll just take our podcast and go home. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And we're just two young widows trying to figure out
Widow we do now. Yes!
Hey, Mel.
What?
I'm wondering how your counseling is going with BetterHelp. How is it going?
Going really well. I love my therapist. We're working on things to help me through grief things, past things, current things. Really helpful. I'm really glad that I am a part of it, and it's been really awesome to have her available on video.
Yeah, it seems super convenient.
Yeah, and she messages me during the week and checks on how I'm doing, and it's awesome.
That's awesome. Do you think that our listeners might benefit from doing it too, if they have some therapy needs?
I do. I think that it would be beneficial for anybody, even if they are not widows, but especially widows, and especially during this time of quarantine / pandemic / riots / everybody hates each other. So, yeah, I think it's a really beneficial thing, and it's a great price too when compared to traditional therapy.
That's awesome. Okay, so if people want to take advantage of the 10% off the first month, they go to trybetterhelp.com, and that's help as in HELP.
Like the Beatles song.
Yeah, /WWDN. So trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.
Just remember, the service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. It's more affordable than offline traditional counseling, and financial aid is available. So for those of you who may be in bad situations because your husband died, or just because you're a human living on the planet and that's a tough thing, BetterHelp can help you with financial solutions so that you can get the therapy that you need. And just a reminder as well, this is not a crisis line or self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. And once you sign up, you will be matched with a counselor within 24 hours. And again, that is trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Happy widowing!
Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts, and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Hey, Mel.
What?
Do you want to introduce our guest for the day? I'm super excited about this interview because I don't know anything about this person, but you do.
This is my friend, Dawn Trythall. She is originally from Minnesota, and then she moved to Northern California, and then she moved to Utah, and then she moved to Arizona, where she is today. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Guess what, Anita?
What?
Dawn is not a widow. I know.
Is she allowed to be here?
Well, you can see for yourself. I think she's allowed
Okay.
to be here because she has a pretty intense story, and it does not have to do with a dead spouse.
That's why I'm so curious about this, because this is a whole different experience and one we haven't had before. So I'm excited to find out what she's doing here and what her story is.
Yes.
Oh, tell us.
So, and we thought it would be, I know that Dawn and I have talked over the last little while we have both been going through our traumas, and we've found so many similarities just in how grief presents itself or different things like that, even though they're completely different scenarios. So I'm going to let you guys learn for yourself Dawn's story. Hi, Dawn. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me. And I'm super excited to be a part of this amazing podcast. I think you're doing so many good things in the world. I think it's always good to find ways to connect, even if we're not all the same. I think a lot of our human experiences have similar veins. So anyway, my name is Dawn, and I am from Phoenix now, just outside of Phoenix. And so although my story isn't a story about death, it is a story about loss and grief. So just a little bit about me. I've been married for 21 years. So, and we have 4 children. Our oldest is in college, and our son, that's number 2, his name is Porter, and he is 17. He'll be a senior in high school. And we have a daughter named Charlie. Our oldest name is Taylor. Sorry, I forgot that. Charlie is 14, and Cannon, our baby boy, is 12. And so our story starts about just a little over 2 years ago. So, and it's about my son, Porter. So let me tell you just a tiny bit about Porter to start out with. Is Porter is the noise in our family. He's super noisy. He's super fun. He always was really well liked in school. He has very, like, I never asked him if his homework was done, because if I did his homework, or his answer was always, of course, Mom, why would I not do my homework? So he was very self-sufficient. He was a very good student. He's a good athlete. He's a good friend. He's just super fun to be around. And he loves sports. He played soccer and baseball, but his favorite is basketball, which is hard because he was never very tall. So that was kind of a bummer. He always wanted to be taller, but I wanted him to play soccer more because he was so fast, and you don't have to be big to be a soccer player. But alas, he loves basketball. Anyway, so he started freshman year, was going great, straight A's, had a little girlfriend. He was loving school, playing basketball. He was homecoming royalty, and in every activity. He went to every game, supported everyone. He just was having the best time ever. And in January, he started having really bad headaches, and we were like, kind of like, oh, you're fine, you're just super busy, you're gone all the time, maybe you're not sleeping enough, are you drinking enough water? We live in Arizona, so every question, if you don't feel good, is, have you drank enough water? My kids hate that question. But so that persisted for a couple of weeks, and he was still just having these headaches, and they were really painful. And so my husband actually ended up bringing him to the doctor when I had an appointment, and they basically said it's the perfect storm. He was kind of a late bloomer, so they're like, it's puberty, we think he's probably having migraines, and he had taken a really hard hit in a game of basketball at the end of December. So we were like, okay, that sounds good. So they gave us some ideas, and we went to the chiropractor, and there was like relief for a little bit, like maybe a week. And then the headaches progressed. Anyway, we brought him back to the doctor. And at that point, I was thinking, we've got to talk to a migraine specialist, because we're at the point where they were a little bit debilitating. We'd come home a few times from school. And so I started calling around and to get into migraine pain clinics. They're months out. So I just made an appointment everywhere I could and thought, we'll just get in when we get in, and he'll be fine, and this will suck, but we can get some medicine and we'll feel better. Well, within the next couple of weeks, he was like vomiting everything. So we would wake him up an hour before he had to get up for school to give him Zofran to hope he would keep his breakfast down, because he was like, I have to go to school. It was like during the time of testing, and that was a high stress time for him. So he would get to school, throw up, go back and take a test, throw up, and get through whatever he had to, and call us and say, you got to bring me home. And so still, I don't know why you would think, what is wrong with you? You should have taken him in again. But at that point, we were within like a week of this migraine clinic that we were scheduled to go to. And so we just felt like we're almost there and we'll just get him by. But he was at that point pretty much throwing up everything he ate, and he could only get relief if he fell asleep with ice on his neck. So anyway, the week of his appointment, my husband had the strongest feeling that he needed to take him to the eye doctor, waking up Monday morning. He threw up on the way to school, and then my husband forgot. And then the next night, Tuesday night, he thought, I need to take him to the eye doctor. He woke up, he's like, I feel like I need to take Porter to the eye doctor. I'm like, okay. Then he forgot. Well, Wednesday morning, my mother-in-law actually called him and said, Tuesday morning, have you thought about taking Porter to get to the eye doctor just to make sure his eyes are good before you go to the migraine clinic? Because if that's an issue, you want to know before. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called me because I felt like I should take him. So just after he talked to his mom, he called the doctor's office, and the doctor said, oh my gosh, we just had a cancellation in an hour. 10 minutes later, Porter texted, Dad, I got to come home. My head hurts so bad. And it just worked out that my husband took him straight to the eye appointment on the way home. We got to the eye appointment. Eyes were great. But as they did the vision behind the eyes, he had what was called papilledema, which is hemorrhaging behind his eyes. And so the eye doctor basically said, I have to send you straight to Phoenix Children's Hospital because this is not normal and you're going to need to get an MRI. So I was actually picking up high school carpool, even though Porter wasn't there, because we had a very intricate carpool system. And even if your kid wasn't there, we usually picked up. So I'm sitting in the carpool line and I pull up papilledema on my phone, and there was no good answers for this situation. Everything was super scary. And I remember his friends getting in the car, and I said, Porter is really sick and he's on his way to the hospital. So just say a prayer for him. I'm sure everything's okay, but we just got to get it figured out. So we took him straight to Phoenix Children's Hospital and waited for 5 hours for an MRI. And he was in so much pain, and he was so dehydrated. Keep in mind, he hasn't kept food down for probably a week now. And he was already very thin. And so finally they call him back at 11 at night, and we go back and we sit and we wait, and there's no one at the hospital really at this point. So we're walking back to the ER room that we had been sitting in for all those hours. And as soon as we open the door, there's 5 people standing in the room. And so a new person introduces themselves. Hey, Mom and Dad, can we just talk to you down the hall? Porter, we need to get some fluid in you. Let's get, and they start to talk to him. And I hear my husband whisper, this isn't good, in my ear. And I think I was still just like, what's going on? It's very, you have no rational thought when things are confusing. And he knew instantly something was wrong, and I just felt super confused. So they bring us to another room, and they sit down and they say, Porter has a very large brain tumor at the base of his 4th ventricle, and it's cancerous. And I was like, I remember saying over and over again, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Like, I just kept saying, I'm so sorry, I don't understand you. And my husband, we're just trying to just get that in. And we're like, okay. And she said, we have to take him back for another MRI that's going to be a long one, like an hour and a half, to scan his spine to make sure that this hasn't spread. What do you want to do? Do you want us to tell him? Or, every family likes to do this differently. And I remember thinking, what parent doesn't go in and tell their kid what is going on? Who leaves that to a medical professional?
Maybe this is a question for down the road, but how were they able to tell it was cancerous just by the MRI without like a biopsy or pathology?
That was my question too. Basically, they said by the look of it, that was their diagnosis. So what I said was, well, do we know for sure? And they said, well, no, but it looks like cancer. And I said, but we'll have to send it and have it biopsied. And so I just said, well, we are not going to deal in anything but for sure's. So no one will tell my kid he has cancer. and we will only deal with things that we know for sure. So I told them I do not want to send him in for another MRI, afraid. So you're going to need to tell him you made a mistake so that he needs to go back in. So our plan was, Porter, we're so sorry. They didn't do the correct scan, so we have to send you back in. So my husband and I have to literally figure out how to present that to Porter without making him afraid. He's not 3.
You guys are so sneaky.
I know. He's 15, you know.
And smart, but
so
yeah.
I did say he has to eat. You haven't let him eat. He's thrown up everything. He has to eat. So we go in, and by the time we went in, they had an ER, a NICU, and people trying to get an IV in him. That's how dehydrated he was. And they had brought in, there's a special team at hospitals that just do blood, any type of vein work or whatever. Anyways, so those people finally got something in him, and I started to feed him, and he was just starving. So we're trying to get some food in him. And as they came to get him for the next MRI, he just threw up everything. And I was just thinking, this poor boy. So we walked down the hall, and the tech that had just run his scan, so he knew exactly what was there, took him back again and just looked at us, and I could just see in his eyes the pain for us. And Porter turned the corner and the door closed, and I lost it. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. And I just kept thinking, brain cancer, and we had to sit for an hour and a half and wait for him and make a plan on how we were going to tell our son this thing, which you, Anita, know what it's like to tell your kids really hard things, and we didn't even have to do something that hard. So we called our parents, and a lot of people were worried because Porter had been sick for a long time, and he has a big group of friends, and his big group of friends from our church and also from the community that don't go to church with us had planned to fast and pray for him on the Thursday of his surgery, or on the Thursday of his migraine appointment, because he was so sick and they were worried about him. So we had a lot of people calling and texting, and I just couldn't deal with any of it, none of it. So I called my parents, and my husband Derek called his parents, and that was it. I sent one text to friends and said, we're not really sure what's going on still, but we need to have some more tests, because I just wanted to leave it where it was. So Porter came out of his MRI, and they obviously admitted him. And Derek and I just went in, and we just told them we decided not to use the word tumor because it's really a scary word. And so we said, there is a mass in your brain, and it's making you sick, and it has to come out. And he said, he was super calm, and he said, am I gonna die? And I said, not today. And I said, we just don't know. And so we have to get it out because it's putting pressure on your brain, and that's what's making you so sick and have so much pain. So it was at this point that they explained to us that the tumor had blocked the flow of brain fluid because it was at his neck, and our bodies, circulate brain fluid, and it goes through our neck into our bodies. And because his was blocking, his ventricles had filled up huge, and this is called hydrocephalus. So that was what was causing the pressure and the vomiting, was the ventricles being so huge with fluid. And the reason why they saw hemorrhaging behind the eyes was because at this point the fluid was getting out, and the path of least resistance would have been his eyes. So the hemorrhaging that we saw at the eye doctor wasn't blood, it was brain fluid. So it was serious. So this was late Tuesday night, midnight. Wednesday, there during the day, and then surgery was scheduled for Thursday morning. So at this point, we still are thinking that it's probably cancer, and preparing for that, but knowing that we just don't know. So we're going to move forward and only deal with the information we have right now. So he was barely, like, he was sleeping all day. At this point, his brain was kind of shutting down. Like, he even wanted a haircut, and my sister drove up at 8:00 at night to give him a haircut, and he fell asleep, and we couldn't wake him back up to even get a haircut. You know, he was just really done by then. It progressed really quickly the last few days. So anyway, the next day, the surgeon, our amazing surgeon, Dr. Bristol, told us it'll be 5 to 6 hours, and we will be in touch every hour. So our hospital is the only trauma one pediatric hospital in the tri-state. They take everything from there. They took a lot of stuff from Mexico. It's a very good hospital to be at, and they are very good. We got a call every hour. Everyone was kind and good. But his 5 to 6 hour surgery ended up being an 11-hour surgery, with a second surgeon being brought in. The head of neurosurgery at Phoenix Children's Hospital was brought in with our surgeon, because his tumor was supravascular. So it was bleeding so much that they would get a piece out and then it would bleed. So they would have to clean that part up. So it was just tedious and long, and the worst day of my whole life. I couldn't, by then I hadn't eaten for 3 days. I remember my cousin sitting next to me and just like putting food inside my mouth. And just because I couldn't even, like, it was making me so sick. And my cousin flew in from California. My sister flew in last minute from Utah. Our friends and family were at the hospital with us all day, which was really helpful. So he came out of surgery at about 11 at night, and we met with the surgeon. And so keep in mind, my biggest stress is my kid has brain cancer. And so she comes out and says, we've biopsied 3 different pieces and none of them are cancerous. So I hear none of them are cancerous, and I kind of like, oh my gosh, whoa, we're okay. You know, that for me was like the biggest relief. And then she says, however, it was attached to the cerebellum and also wrapped around his brain stem. So we had to scrape a couple of layers off of his brain stem to get the whole tumor out. And my husband, that hit him. So I was still in this, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And he heard that, and that hurt his soul, because he knew what that would mean for Porter. And the doctor said he's probably going to lose some of his coordination. Keep in mind, this is the kid that literally everything he wanted to learn that was an activity, he could do, because he was just always super coordinated, great hands. You know, he loves sports. He never wants to sit still. He wants to play all the things.
So you are speaking my language right now, but I don't know if it was your language at that time. Were you unsure of what those things meant, or did they kind of walk through, like, this is why it's a big deal that they had to scrape layers off the cerebellum and the brainstem? And did your husband know that, or how did he know that it was serious and you were just still sort of like, you know, what does that mean? Does that make sense? My question.
Totally, it totally makes sense. I think I was just so freaked out about the cancer that I lost the rest of the words, because they're outside of my understanding of the world. Like, I don't have any medical background.
Right. Okay.
So, and he had done more reading than I had, because I just, you know, so he was a little more familiar with what that would mean for, but neither one of us had any clue what that really meant. So she was like, he's going to have some therapy probably, and this and that and the other. And so I was thinking, well, my kid's not going to die of brain cancer. So yeah, if we have to do therapy, we'll do therapy, you know? That's how I was thinking. So we went back to see him, and nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. And this is where my lack of knowledge was so difficult, that if your brain stem is disrupted or traumatized, your brain stem controls all of your basic functions, meaning your breathing, your temperature, your everything. And he was on a ventilator, and he had a drain from his brain, and it was just super traumatic. I don't know why I didn't prepare for that, but the ventilator just did me in. In fact, when he has to go to have MRIs even now, and they put him on oxygen and he comes out, his breath makes me physically ill. It's like almost a PTSD response, because the smell of a ventilator, if you've ever been around that, was so sickening to me. It just was so sad and terrible. And my beautiful boy couldn't breathe on his own, like literally didn't have the ability to breathe on his own. So and that was kind of the beginning of the second chapter of this, because Porter didn't wake up from his surgery for 6 months. So we expected him to wake up any day, and he just didn't. And they just didn't know why. So we spent weeks at the hospital, and if you've been in a traumatic situation like this, you know that you're dealing with a lot of new information. So there were a lot of complications that could have happened, but he had all of them. So they would say, there's a very small chance, like at this hospital, we do 250 brain tumor removals a year, and maybe 2 kids get posterior fossa syndrome. And he has that. And I'm like, what is that? And then I go home and Google it. And then I sit in my closet and cry for 2 hours. And then I say, okay, I learned to not Google any of the things and just say, what does that mean for my kid? Because you can go to every terrible place, and it's almost a situation where, for me and for our family, we started deciding that we were only dealing with what Porter's situation was, because it was too painful to deal with all of the what ifs. So then he had hydrocephalus again, and that was something that was reoccurring.
So now all this is going on. Porter's in the hospital, not waking up, and you have 3 other kids. How in the world did you manage all of that?
So we didn't. We're terrible people. And
You're not.
You're like us.
we disappeared. Now, I will say that we have a very deep village, to which I will forever be grateful. So, and my oldest daughter was 17. So she was able to drive. My parents live close to me. I have siblings that are close to me, and don't have a huge group of friends, but my core friends are like sisters to me. And so my kids were taken to school every day. Their carpools just picked them up and dropped them off. Their people would get my kids with a meal, bring my kids and a meal to the hospital so we could have dinner together at night.
I just want to know if you feel guilty for ruining the intricate high school pickup system, because that took a lot of effort to figure out, and your son's dumb brain tumor ruined all of that.
So dumb. Our carpool was for 3 schools and color coordinated. I ruined everything.
What?
And I was so
I don't know
guilty.
what that means.
I was like, I'm so sorry, but you're going to have to care for my children.
Yeah.
I also want to know how you functioned not going to Sonic every single day. Or did people bring you Sonic? Because I know this, and now all of you are going to know this. Dawn is addicted to Pebble Ice
Oh, it's so good.
and Sonic.
I love Pebble Ice and I love Diet Coke, and I was well supplied at the hospital.
Okay, good.
Good.
How did you tell the other kids about the brain tumor? And also, was he in the hospital for 6 months while I can't remember. Was he there the whole 6 months of him being asleep, or was he sent home?
So Porter got diagnosed, remember, late Tuesday night, and then we had the kids come up on Wednesday morning, and we just brought him in and said, Porter has a mass in his brain and it has to come out. And at that point, they knew how sick he was. So it was just, even though it was super scary, he was super sick. So I think all of us were like, it's going to come out and Porter's going to feel better and get back to crazy, silly Porter. And also, I think that grief is a crazy, angry beast. And so you never get any warning. So when things are super hard, sometimes you have extra strength, and then you find little things that are really painful that trigger things. And so we just decided as a family to kind of deal with things as they came up and tell our kids that they can talk to us. My kids have a deep mama village because my friends are my sisters. And so they had a lot of love and calm around them, whether I was there or not, because they have beautiful women in their lives that follow their instincts and follow things that they feel like they need to do. So I was grateful that when I was in trauma and breaking, that there were other people that could step in and just fill in the gaps that I couldn't at the time. Like my Charlie said, the night Porter went into the hospital, one of my good friends stopped by with ice cream and said, I'm just here to give everyone a hug and cry. And that was really helpful to them because it felt like they weren't alone over something super scary. So Porter was not in the hospital for 6 months. He was in the hospital for about 2.5 months. And he was in and out of different units, but he spent most of his time in the PICU, which is the pediatric ICU, because he was not really able to manage the fluid in his brain, in his ventricles. It was just a problem. And so it kept filling up his brain. And so they decided to put in a shunt, which is just a medical device that helps the ventricles drain so that things don't get over a certain point. So that went in his brain, and it drains into the abdomen, and it's great. And Porter responded really well to that. But then he had another bout of hydrocephalus because there was a problem with the shunt. So this never happens. I'm doing air quotes, but of course it happened to him. And then there was actually some type of infection on the shunt. This never happens, but it happened to him. So we have had multiple shunts. Well, every time a shunt comes out, they have to go back to the PICU because they have to put the drain back in his brain. And only the nurses in the PICU are qualified to manage that particular medical need. So we spent most of our time there. At the very end, they transferred us to inpatient rehab. Just kind of saying, let's just give him a chance to try and see if he can do some rehab. So he was in a coma, but that's the best way to describe it to most people. But it's more like what they call it is an acute state, meaning his eyes were open, but he couldn't communicate. Occasionally he would like squeeze a hand if you asked him to, but it wasn't consistent. So we just didn't really know what was going on inside of his brain. So we went down to inpatient rehab and we spent some time there, and it was okay. It was really painful and really hard because he just wasn't really able to do anything. So weekly, you go in and you meet with the whole rehab team, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the therapists. And Derek and I had done 2 meetings. So this is our 3rd one. And by then he had tried to go back to work a little bit. And so I told him, I'll just call you and we'll do this meeting. It's not a big deal. It's like, we just go through his goals, blah, blah, blah. Well, I sit down and they basically say, Porter's not progressing and we're going to send him home. And I was like paralyzed because I'm looking at my son who cannot move any of his body. He cannot do anything for himself. He is got a feeding tube in his nose. He's just, and I'm thinking, how am I going to care for my son at home like this? Like, I was so overwhelmed. I just started crying and just feeling so overwhelmed. And they were like, we're going to just do, he's going to have surgery in a couple of days for a G tube, and then we'll just send you guys home. So they were going to take the tube out of his nose for feeding and put a permanent tube for feeding into his stomach. And that was it. And they were done. And I was like, I can't do this. This was the scariest thing ever. And we only had a few days to just manage moving him home. And I don't know, caring for someone at home is a whole different ball game than being at a hospital with the resources that they have. And I was terrible because I was kind of ignoring learning anything about his medical situation as far as how to do stuff, because I was in denial and I was like, I don't need to know that. So I full blown just pretended like it wasn't important for me, even though my husband and I were with him at all times and we did a lot of things for him. The medical side of it, I just felt like he was going to wake up and he was going to come home and I wouldn't need to know that. So then I also realized how much I had to learn to transition him to home, and I kind of just shut down. Like, all of me just was, I can't learn this. It's too hard. It's so scary. And luckily for us, we had amazing nurses that worked really closely with us and got us trained and supported us and helped us. We had family that helped us. And so we ended up transitioning him to home, which, truth be told, was the right thing to do because he needed to be home with his siblings. He needed to be closer to friends and family, to hear them and feel them. But it was a really scary time for us. So at this point, he's still in this acute coma state. And he was like that. He went home in July and he was like that until I think the end of October. So at that point, we were going to outpatient rehab multiple times a week. It was terrible. All of his devices, and he was throwing up all the time. Because this is one scary thing about being in the hospital and getting sent around all the time, is when you need a specialty, then it's just whoever's on call comes and they just make a plan for you. And you're not following up necessarily with the same people. So he, in retrospect, was getting fed way too much because he had lost a lot of weight and he was already thin. So they were trying to help him regain that because your brain needs fat and food and nutrition to heal. But we were feeding him way too much, which we didn't know because it was new to us. And he was just throwing up all day, all the time. So it was just, we were taking him in the car. I had friends and family come with me every day. It was just weeks like this until we finally figured out the vomiting. And we moved forward and we started to get a little bit of response from him. And one day, my daughter, Charlie, a couple of his friends were over, and she had an idea. They had asked him to do some therapy with his mouth, like to help him start to begin to hopefully eat on his own, because brainstem traumatized. He doesn't know how to swallow. So he had to learn how to do that. And so they were wanting him to push his tongue on the sides of his cheeks just to strengthen that muscle. And my daughter was sitting with him and she says, Mom, you got to see what he's doing. And I was in a conversation with my husband and I said, okay, I'll be there in a second. And come to find out, she had told him, put your tongue to the right for yes and to the left for no. So keep in mind, we hadn't had any response from him at all. We didn't even know if he understood anything. He wasn't verbal or moving. And he did that. And that was the first we knew that he was in there and that he knew and that he was waking up. So we sat the whole night crying and asking him questions, and he would answer yes and no. And that was like our first lifeline, that he was in there and that we just needed to keep moving forward. So as that happened, he started to make some progress. So fast forward a little bit, because it's such a long story, but in December, he said his first word. So every morning my husband would go down and say mom, buddy, just say mom. And he would open his mouth and try, just couldn't get anything out. And one day I hear my husband and my youngest son, come down. And I came down the stairs and he says, barely with this tiny little voice, Mom. That was just the first word that came out of his mouth. And so that began his speech to start to come back. He still used an alphabet page. So we would sit with him to communicate, and he would spell a letter at a time to talk to us. And Porter is very meticulous, so it was a little annoying because he always had to use complete sentences. I was like, can we minimize this? So, and then he slowly began to speak again and be able to roll over. He started a terrible therapy. It's a swallow therapy called Vital Stim that's not normally used with children, but because he was 15, they thought he would be a good person to use it with. And it was great, but it was terrible because they use all these different ways of choking you. Basically, they put lemon swabs down your throat to see if you can protect your airway. So it was an hour, 4 days a week of watching them choke my kid and him throw up. And it was terrible, but it was something that he needed that allowed him to begin to eat. And then he slowly began to make some progress. And one thing, I'm just going to back up 1 second. When we transitioned from inpatient to outpatient, my brother-in-law was visiting from Utah. They were there helping us, and they were there one day, and he's a big, big tease, and he teases his wife relentlessly, and my son Porter loves it. It's so funny to him. And Kenny said something in jest to tease his wife, and Porter went, and we all stopped. We're like, did he just laugh? Oh my gosh, he just laughed. And then we're like, he couldn't have laughed. And then Kenny said something else to Jessica and he laughed again. And we were like, he's there, you know? So we told the therapist, he's in there and he laughs, and it's never inappropriate. It's never something that is random at all. It's always specific. It's at something specific. It's in response to something. And they were like, oh, okay. But then as they started to work with him, that laughter was like the one thing that gave them some power to say, he's in there and he's progressing. So it's interesting how God just gives you little things that you need to continue the fight, because that was a big deal for him.
So my husband died at the end of 2017, and this whole thing with Porter for you started in 2018. And so I remember you and I were always texting back and forth like, I mean, neither of us could understand each other's situation, but we felt like compassion for the other. And I remember the similarities that we had. We were talking about how things are so horrible and so scary, but then you have that one little tiny thing, that little thread, and then that gets you through. What are your thoughts about the duality of grief? Because it is really terrible, but at the same time it kind of excavates you to have something really beautiful that you would never have experienced had you not had the terrible part. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and it's been really crazy because it's hard to really explain your road without seeing all the miracles around you and all the love around you. So even in the worst times, the worst days, the saddest moments, I felt this sense of love and support around us. Our family has grown closer in a really unique way that I wouldn't want anyone to have to go through, but we've grown so much together. My children are, for a while, I was like, they're going to hate each other forever. This is it. They're going to leave my house and never come back. And in that time, they had to take care of one another. So it was a unique situation. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Wonder or seen the movie.
Yes.
I love it. Mel, you have to see it. Porter is the son at our house. In that book, they have a handicapped child that's the son. Well, Porter is the son, and everyone is okay with that. And we try to have a place where everyone knows if they need a little extra, they can express that. But it's amazing to watch them serve their brother. So that one thing, like as a family, has been really unique. And I wouldn't change that. And I don't think my kids would change that. And also on another side, our situation is really, really hard, but we go to the hospital with people that are doing really, really hard things all the time. And we have made, like your friendship, look what has come of your friendship that you never would have had in any other way. And yet it's blessed both of your lives deeply. We have friends that we would have never had in any other way if we weren't on this road. Just one example, one day I was going to church and a lady at our church, her sister was visiting, and she saw me load Porter, and I carry Porter on my back quite often to move him around because he can't walk. And at that time he couldn't walk at all. So I would put him on my back and move him to his wheelchair. It was just easier and more stable actually for him because he didn't have a lot of strength. And we get a call that night, and this lady says, my sister's visiting and her husband just passed away from Parkinson's, and she has a wheelchair van and she wants to give it to your family. I was like, what? I just couldn't believe it. I was like, there's no way. Who does that?
A van,
a fully wheelchair van. He was a veteran, so it was top of the line. She's like, we don't always get good healthcare and we have to wait a lot, but we do get good things. So they gave us this van, and it was so helpful for Porter. It was so much easier to transport him. Well, at Christmas time, Porter and us decided that our time with the van was done, that he was in a better place and didn't need as much support, and we could use our car. So we gave the van to another family at the hospital for Christmas. His little friend, Jamarcus, that he loves and that we spend a lot of time with, and they have a very tragic story. And they were in a terrible accident, and they lost their daughter, and their son, Jamarcus, has been left in kind of an acute state too. And he's super special, and so is his family. And his chair is different because it's hard to maneuver and fold up. Anyway, so we were able to pass that on to them, and that was such a blessing. We're just suddenly you're a part of a club you didn't want to be in, but the truth is it's a really special club. and you meet people that you would have never met, and you are able to grow and learn and grieve together. There's been so many times at the hospital where I've sat and said, "What is your story?" And some people just need to say their story. They just need to say it out loud. We have another friend at the hospital. He was shot by his cousin and he's paralyzed now. And his grandfather cares for him. And his grandfather has lived this rough road. He's struggled with drugs and all these different things. And he got cleaned up to take care of his son. And he just sat and wept, telling me, "We're so glad to see Porter. He inspires us." So, and his grandson is the same. We've made these connections that are so valuable and that have made our life richer. And so we can't rewind or we lose those.
I so identify with what you're saying right now. There have been points in time where I have tried to look back to where Jason died and try and predict where we would be now had he not died. And I can't do it anymore because I feel like I've traveled so far from where that starting point was. And many of the reasons that I've traveled that way is because of the relationships and because of the experiences and because of the blessings that have come directly, albeit a little bit like annoyingly, from tragedy. And like you're saying, like, Mel and I, we would not have been friends. And there's so many more of those. And sometimes it kind of makes me mad to have to admit it. But there are a lot of those. And I started writing them down in a book right after Jason died. And there's just a lot of them, even if it's begrudgingly. It's true. It changes you. It gives you an opportunity to grow in a direction that you would never, ever have grown without being shoved off the cliff, basically. So I'm with you. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term beauty for ashes, but it's like a biblical term, and it or biblical phrase, and it's describing exactly what you're saying, that something that was awful and burning and ashes turns into beautiful. And I try and think about that often when I'm pissed off and angry.
And Porter also has done things that have been beneficial for charity. Like, can you tell us about some of those things that he's done to help? Because he's an inspiration to like the whole community down there for sure. So tell us some of the stuff that he has done to, even though his situation is so frustrating for him, how he's helping others.
Yeah, so he, because we're at the hospital 5 days a week, I think there's no one else that goes as much as we do. Our therapist family is like our family, not just the therapists we work with, but all of the therapists there. He loves them. They love him. And they had reached out to Phoenix Children's Foundation, and they decided to do a story on Porter. And in the process of kind of looking at the foundation, we realized they were doing a 5K last October, and Porter really wanted to do that. And he wanted to set that as a goal to be able to take some steps at that 5K. And we were able to fundraise for it. He was able to work really hard towards a goal, and he has some Parkinsonian tremors and some other things that physically have made it difficult for him to be able to walk again at this point. And so it was a fight. Watching him fight like that was amazing. And a lot of people came out. We earned a lot of money. It was just great. He's on one of the inpatient rehab buses, a picture of him. So cute. But he has lost so much in this. I asked him the other day, what are some of the things that you've learned? And he said, your speaking is a gift and seeing is a gift, because his brain is being completely rewired, and there's been damage done to the nerves. And part of that is that he's lost all of his facial nerves. So he can't smile. And my kid has like the golden smile, and he's unable to smile. He's unable to see. He can't walk. There's a lot of things that feel super overwhelming for a kid who, for his whole life, set a goal and reached it. Well, I want to learn to do that. Every class, what do I need to do to earn an A in your class? And then he just does all the things. So the fact that he's willing to go outside of himself and see others. Everyone at the hospital loves him. All the kids run over, Porter, Porter. And he feels like they're afraid of his face because he doesn't smile. But I said, it doesn't matter, because you are still a person that gathers. You have an openness about you that even though your face doesn't look the same, people still see the light inside of you. And it's really hard. Like, I asked him, what is the thing you would want back? And he said, Mom, if I could smile again, I would give up ever walking again. Sucks. How stupid is that? Sometimes I'm like, are you kidding me? Can we get like one win? Can we smile? Can we see? Can we walk? Like, give me a freaking win, you know? So there's moments where I'm just so sad. And the other thing is, Porter's situation is brain and nerves. So there's one thing that means is that there are no answers. So for us, grief is like this messy, icky thing like everyone else, but then it's all unknown. So it's not like, Porter, you're paralyzed, you're not going to walk again. Okay, well, let me start to deal with that thing in my life. It's, will Porter walk again? Maybe. Will he see again? Yeah, if his facial nerves heal. Will he talk right again? Possibly. Will he smile again? Maybe. So we're in this like icky, gooey grief state where we don't know what to grieve, but we're grieving a terrible loss. It's just, I don't know how to explain it, because we're just shooting into the dark and trying to hope that something feels peaceful in the midst of only unknown. And yet at the same time, he works harder than anyone I know. He has never, ever once told a therapist, I'm not going to do that. They could say, we're going to take you up to the top and we're going to bounce you off this trampoline and we want you to try to fly. And he'd be like, okay, I'll try. Like, he works till he can't possibly work anymore. And the other side of that is that the blessing that we have had is that he hasn't lost anything cognitive. So he truly has all of his intelligence and personality stuck in a broken body. But see that. Well, I'm just saying people can't see that because they think because they see that the outside is handicapped, that he's not there inside either.
I came down to visit you guys and I got to see Porter in action at his physical therapy in the hospital, and then we went home later and by that point he could text. I think this was last summer, maybe?
Yeah, I think
something
so,
like that. So 2019. And so it was so nice to be able to text with him, because it's true. It's like at that point, I mean, he could do some things, but he couldn't speak, and like his face is blank pretty much, but you know he's in there. And so I was texting him, and it was so interesting to like be conversing with Porter, but then it's a totally different Porter on the outside than you're familiar with. But I remember saying, so Porter, do you feel like you are all the way there in your brain right now? Like, do you remember things? Like, can you do math problems? Can you do all that? Do you feel like your brain is back, but it's just not coming out of your mouth and your body's not working? And he's like, yes. It's so frustrating, because I think at the time, like, that's what he was getting frustrated with when you and I were together. Like, there was something specific he was working on, or it's just like he's like, I'm here, I just can't move my face.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. And it's hard because he's out of sight, out of mind in a lot of ways. And I know you guys have talked about this, just where the funeral's done or you're home from the hospital or whatever it is, the trauma tends to have like a point where it seems to be done. But in many ways, our trauma keeps going. And like last week, my mother-in-law sent me a video from her timeline of Porter hitting a home run in a baseball game a few years ago. And I sobbed for 2 days thinking of him running so fast around those bases. Like, it was so painful to know that that is probably not something that will happen for him again. And so we're just taking everything a step at a time. Also, a lot of people are like, we're at the point where he is a little more mobile. He is doing better. He wants to feel more normal, but there's a lot of logistics to our life. And people always want to tell us, like, well, you need to do this. You just need to go on vacation. We just need to do this. It'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I'm like, I appreciate that you are being so helpful. Also, that if you knew what our life looked like for 5 minutes, you wouldn't leave your bed.
I love that. You're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Here's the thing that you need to know. You needed to have me as a friend and not Mel as a friend, because this is like the like heavenly whatevers got switched up because you were supposed to be my friend.
Excuse me.
So my
We are
first
friends.
I just want you to know that when we were in Porter's rehab in the hospital, part of the rehab was playing a little keyboard. So I'm important.
So my first job out of physical therapy school was inpatient rehab. So yeah, I worked in an inpatient rehab facility for about 4 years. So all of the things you're describing, I mean, I just am like right there. And I could have told you that they're going to say to you one day, hey, we're going to send him home. And you're going to be like, what? Excuse me? And you're going to feel completely unprepared, because that's always how it happens. That you never feel like, yes, now we're ready to go home. They're like, okay, and bye. And then there you go to go take care of things that you're completely not ready to. So if you would have been my friend, I would have prepared you for that. And I would have been like, oh, get ready, because they're going to send him home and you're going to say, are you shitting me?
That's exactly what I did say. I was like,
yeah, like, you've got to be kidding me, right? I can't deal with all of this
do
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
It's
Oh my
so
gosh.
it's so
Yeah.
crazy. But you know what? I think that, and you guys have said this before, but most people mean well always. And it's no, even if you are in similar circumstances, no one walks through grief in the same way at all. My husband and I have grieved completely differently. In fact, this is crazy, but we took Border home and we had to move him downstairs, because obviously, how are we going to get him upstairs? So and he was throwing up all the time. So we had to do we had been ready to do a few changes to our house, like few updates. So we're going to redo the flooring. And he started a huge project at our house. And I was like, everyone kept saying, how are you living with like this? But the truth is he couldn't fix his son. So he fixed the house. And I felt everyone that walked in my house during that little bit of time was like, this is crazy. Why are you guys doing this? And I felt super calm and not stressed by it at all. I just felt like it's fine. And it was therapy to him. And so that's what we did. And we have just put one foot in front of the other.
So, where are you guys at with your mental health at this point? And have you guys done any mental health therapy, or has Porter done that, or have your kids done that? Have you done it as a family? Have you even had time to think about it because you're like, I don't know what's happening, I just need pebble ice? Where are you at with that?
Yes, to all of the above. No, we are just a raging hot mess all the time. Really know how to make that any better. We should have counseling. Like, initially in the hospital, they kind of took us aside and said, parents that leave this, usually things like this, have like legit PTSD, and it's gonna suck. Also, stuff like this is never easy on a marriage. And although I think we've handled it the best we can, we came home and we are both full-time caregivers. For months, we couldn't leave Porter because he couldn't speak and he was throwing up so much that he would have died had we left him for 3 minutes. Like, so I couldn't even go to the bathroom. We would have to call each other and switch, and so it's been really hard, and we should have been in counseling the whole time, but I couldn't even begin to add one more thing to our life. And Now I think that Porter's in he's safer now. He is doing much better. But I think a lot of the loss is starting to creep up, and we're having to kind of tackle it. And Porter, I think because his situation is unknown, it's kept him hopeful. But just recently, he's kind of said, I'm done, Mom. He's going to be a senior this year. And for some reason, that's kind of triggered. Sorry, Anita. Triggered a lot of
It's
feelings.
okay. You can use the word. I just don't like the word.
Triggered a lot of feelings because we never thought we would be here like this. And he said to me about a month ago, if I'm not smiling and I'm not walking and talking normal, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to be the outcast. I don't want to be the one with the scary face. And that kind of hit me because he has such a big group of friends, and a lot of them have stayed close to him, but they're also seniors in high school. They've got girlfriends and jobs and families, and he can't do any of the things that they're doing.
The thing about this that's so interesting is that when you're grieving, so Mel and I are grieving a clean break, right? Boom, our husbands are gone. And you are grieving not a clean break. You are re-grieving a loss of possibility and a loss of function and a loss of a life that you expected to have. And you're experiencing that both for yourself and you're experiencing it for Porter because your life looks different than you thought it was going to look. You probably never thought, I'm going to be a full-time caregiver and I'm going to be taking somebody to the bathroom and I'm going to be carrying somebody on my back in and out of a car. You know, those things are probably not what you expected your life to look like. And also, when you were talking about watching the home run, you expected your son to have this normal life and you're grieving that he has lost that also. But it's a repetitive grief in a way that's a little bit different than us, but we have threads of that as well because we have lost what we expected our lives to be like and things that would happen in the future. So it's interesting how grief can be so vastly different and it can be the same even in very different situations. Like we've talked about how Mel and I have very similar situations, but we have also walked a very different road as well, even though we walk the same road also. So I think it's kind of cool that we have gone a little bit away from the whole widow idea to have you here to talk about just a different vein of grief that's still the same in a lot of ways, but also different. Same but different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like unrelenting.
That was a lot of words.
You have unrelenting circumstances and you don't know the end for any of it, like you said before. So
I do want to say, because we go to the hospital with lots of different kinds of people, and I told this to Porter the other day. I said, buddy, but this road isn't easy and I'll never minimize it. But I didn't have to send you to heaven. And lots of moms have to send their babies to heaven. And lots of people have to send people they love. And so I know that it's not the same. However, for those who have loss is so grand and it can show up in so many ways. I find that it's so important to me, and I know I'm doing it and I want to stop myself all the time. But if someone new meets Porter and doesn't know him, I just feel like I have to show them a picture of him before or a video of him doing something silly. He never stopped dancing. Mel knows this. Singing, dancing, crazy, jumping on you, hugging you. He's like just always noisy.
Sounds like my kids.
Yeah, just a normal kid, but he was just so noisy and fun in the life of every party. And I still can't get used to him being quiet. And I can see myself going, this person does not want to see a picture of your kid 2 years ago. But I have to show them because I know that that's important to him because he doesn't feel like his body represents him anymore.
Do you feel like part of the reason you need to show them a picture is so that they can bear witness to your loss? that they can see where you were and where you are now and understand the depth of the loss that you have had.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I feel the same way in a lot of ways. I have a really hard time with new people who come into my life who didn't know Jason. I just sometimes want to shake him and just be like, you have no idea what I lost. So whenever like we got new neighbors and I was like, you guys will never understand. You cannot understand the depth of my loss. And I can't explain it to you. And I don't know how to even have a relationship sometimes with people who don't understand that.
That's
It's
how
hard.
I feel totally. And we recently, I told Mel this in the middle of Corona, moved. Who does that? Stupid people. But Porter a few months ago just started to express that he's really lonely and isolated because our other house was 2-story and we were all upstairs and he was downstairs. You have to understand, I am a creature of habit. I do not want my life to change. I want to do all the things I do and have them be consistent. And so I had no plan to change my house until all my kids were gone and I was building a grandma house. That was my plan.
For me.
I know. And so, but we realized that he couldn't be independent in our old house. And so we've moved for him to a 1-story and it's super hard. And we're in a new neighborhood. And I sobbed a million tears because I said, no one is going to know Porter. We're leaving the house where he was healthy. We're leaving the place where he was whole. And it was super painful to me, but he's very happy here. The week before we moved, I found his wheelchair at the bottom of our stairs with no Porter in it. And I'm freaking out. And I run up the stairs. I'm like, what's going on? And I see, and we have like a lot of stairs and a long hallway back to his siblings' rooms. And he had crawled all the way down the hall to wake them up because he missed them.
Aw.
And his knees were bleeding because he has not control of his body. So he was falling over and scraping along. And I'm like, we have to move. This is the right thing for him. So yeah, our whole life story has changed and we still have Porter with us, but it is not the same. And we're all different because of it.
Mel, I have a question for you related to this.
Okay.
Did you ever consider Scott not actually dying, but having not had oxygen for a while, and then them being able to revive him, but him being completely debilitated? Did you ever think through that scenario?
I actually did. That's funny that you say that.
Well, I wonder if a lot of people do. And was your determination that you were happy that he just died? Or would you have rather have had him here, but not had him here?
Would still rather have things have gone the way that they went, because I know that Scott would have not been happy. He would have been depressed. I also would probably be a super sucky caretaker. And that would also make him extra sad. So, yeah, I actually did consider that because it's like, well, what if they just did more chest compressions? And what if by some miracle Scott came back to consciousness? But he would have been without oxygen for all that time. If he were to survive, he would have come back with brain damage and he wouldn't have been Scott. So I still stand by my opinion that the way things went are the best for my circumstance. And for Scott, he would have been a terrible patient. Oh my gosh. So grumpy. Whatever.
So it's so funny because Jason always accused me of being a horrible caretaker. Even though I would have been a highly skilled caretaker because I'm a physical therapist. Like, so when he got hit by a car on his bike and he was broken for a little while, I just got to tell you this story, anyway, we would go to the doctor and he'd be like, and he had a traumatic brain injury, so he was in crazy town. And he would say to the doctor, "My wife is so mean to me." And I was always like, "Don't say that." And I was like, "It's because I make him put his own shirt on, and like he wants me to help him do something." And the physical therapist in me is like, "No, you have to do it yourself." And so we would go to the neurologist, and he'd be like, "My wife is so mean to me." And I'm like, don't say that. They're going to think I'm abusive, but I'm not abusive. I'm just a physical therapist. So he always used to tease me that I was mean, and I was not I had no compassion for anybody, because I was always like, "You can do, you got to do it. You got to try. You got to," anyway, which serves you well in your physical therapist capacity. But sometimes, actually, I always believe that everybody gets a choice about whether or not they get to die. And this is just me. This is not, there's no like actual information that says this, but that they also get to have the information about what that means if they were to come back. And so I like to give Jason credit for deciding to die, because he knew that if he came back, his body would be destroyed. Sounds kind of terrible to say it that way, but that's how I choose to look at it, so I can kind of celebrate his bravery in a way to sacrifice himself in kind of a way so he didn't have to come back not as himself and just make me take care of him, which honestly would be really, really difficult.
I think it was purely selfish of Jason, because he knew that you would be the worst. He's like, "I'm out of here."
He's like, "She's going to make me put on my own shirt."
He's like, "I have had experience with this. I am done. I'm just going to haunt you."
So, yeah. Which he did, by the way, not me, but my in-laws. Yeah, they were talking about him and his mom, who are both dead, and a picture fell off the wall.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, sorry.
Dawn, I was wondering if you could tell us the story of the paper cranes, because I know this story because I've kind of followed, you and I have talked through all this stuff, but I know that Anita needs to hear this, and our listeners, because this is a great story. So tell us about the paper cranes.
So when Porter was still in the hospital, just out of surgery, our community, a lot of his friends, a lot of people from church came together, and they made paper, like origami cranes. And there's a story about the cranes that if you fold these cranes, and if there's 1,000, that it grants a mother's wish. And so they brought them to the hospital, and there was just over 1,000, and they were strung, and we put them in all of his rooms. And he was famous in the hospital for these cranes, and they became something really special. In fact, one of the times that he had to go back to the PICU, I was so pissed. And I was like, "I'm over this. I'm not moving his stuff. I'm not moving these cranes. They're going to get broken. They're paper. I'm not redecorating a new room that feels happy in this terrible, not happy place." And I literally packed everything up and brought it home, because I was just done. I was like, "I can't do this. We need a win, and we're not getting any wins." So I brought everything home, and my husband and I were switching off days coming to the hospital, and he got there the next morning, and we're back in the PICU. So everyone there knows us, and the attending comes in shortly after for rounds, and she's got like 10 doctors with her, and she comes through the door, and Derek's like, "Hi, good morning." He's like, and she says to him, "Where are the cranes?" And he's like, "Well, Dawn brought them home, and she said, I saw Porter was back in here. I brought all these people to see the cranes. You tell Dawn they need to be back here by..." So they were just such, I know.
Okay.
So I was like, crap, and I had to bring him back. But
you're like, "You guys can hang them up then, you doctors who, have all the time
so
in
much
the
time
world."
on your hands. Anyway, they were just made with love. So many people made those and put them together and brought them to us, and they were in his room, coming home from the hospital. And I bought little cranes that I've given to all of the special people in his life, his best friends and his doctors and his therapists and his teachers, and just this idea of hope. And the thing is that what I've learned from Porter is that you can trounce through the hardest things if you are willing to work hard. And he works harder than anyone I know. He's still a good friend in his own way and the best way he can be. And he still fights as hard as he can. I remember saying to him one time, I wish I could take this from you. I would do anything to take this from you. And he reached over and grabbed my hand and said, Mom, no, in his slow, strained voice. I wouldn't give it to you. So Porter has somehow agreed to this really hard life challenge. And even though we are wading through a lot of hard things all the time, even though we're in this perpetual grief state, I always tell people, I can't live in the past, I can't live in the coulda, wouldas, and I can't live in the what ifs. So my life is really day by day, sometimes hour by hour. I just try to get up and do the best I can because either place for me is too painful. And so we just plow through a day at a time. Okay, and sometimes it's terrible.
Right?
Guessing game. I wake up and I'm like, is this day gonna be great or terrible?
The answer is all of the above.
Probably a little of each.
D,
Yes,
all of the
yes,
above.
yes.
Yes.
Get yourself a Diet Coke.
But you know what? I am so proud of Porter for even in addition to, of course, being the hardest worker. And it's true, like when I've been in my grief and I'm just like, I don't even want to do this life anymore, I think about Porter and this kid that like, and I knew him before, you know, when he had all his mobility and could talk and all this stuff. And I know him now. And just to see how hard he works, it makes me be like, Mel, you are such a baby. Like, shut up. Just keep going. Because Porter can do all these things. You can do like this one thing. But I'm so excited that he can eat hot dogs now. Because that was kind of our thing, right?
No.
We would eat hot dogs together and Cheetos, like flaming hot Cheetos, the disgusting food.
Terrible and delicious.
Yeah. So, Porter, keep going. See if you can eat 2 hot dogs.
Oh, yeah. He eats hot dogs. It's all over his face, but he eats them.
You guys, I hope you have enjoyed hearing a story that was a little bit different, but had veins of similarity in the grief. I found it really interesting, and I'm happy that I got to meet you and that now you're going to be my friend instead of Mel's friend, so I can tell you all of the things that she doesn't know that I know.
Oh my
Sorry,
gosh.
Mel. You're kicked
Rude.
out. Just kidding.
We're married, Anita. We're a package deal.
I know, it's true. It's true. Okay, you get both of us. Thanks for listening. Remember to join the Facebook group,
Widow Wives
The Widow
Club.
We Do Now Widow Wives Club. Thank you. And also remember the National Anthem contest. In order to submit your entry, you must post a comment and a review. You must post a review and a rating on iTunes or send us an email and tell us what country you're from. Join us next time. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
I'm Dawn.
And we're 2 widows and 1 lady who messed up the carpool schedule with her son's stupid brain tumor. And we're trying to figure out widow we do now.
So
And also brain tumor we do now.
Yeah.
Brain
It
tumor
doesn't have
suck.
the same ring to it, but it's still cool.
Hashtag.
This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys. Such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.